Hello, everybody. My name is Asher, your host for the Revenue Journey podcast, where we interview and grab unique perspectives from amazing individuals doing technology sales within the APAC region. Welcome to season 2 of this podcast. If you're already in technology sales today, I hope this podcast gives you more insights into the technology sales landscape in APAC. However, if you're not in technology sales today and you're considering making a leap into this exciting career, tuning into a podcast like this could really help you. Also, if you're looking for help to get into technology sales, I also offer consultation services for individuals looking to get into technology sales. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or through the Get Higher Tech Sales website, which will be in this episode's description. So with that being said, let's get this episode started. Hello, Joel. Welcome to the Revenue Journey podcast. Now, firstly, thank you for being a guest on this show and tell us how you're feeling this Wednesday evening.
Well, it's the first time I went back to the gym in like a week, so I'm really proud of myself and full of energy, ready to get started and start talking with you.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really excited about this podcast episode, right? Just because literally 1 minute ago, we were saying how appropriate this episode is. But of course, I think one thing to share here is that, Joel, you are right now in Mixpanel, a product-led growth company. I'm at Supermetrics, a product-led growth company as well. So I think that essentially we're also in this kind of like the same role, same stage of our career. So yeah, when I first spoke to you, definitely a lot of things in common. And I'm really excited to have you on this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so maybe, Joel, why not you just start off by giving us some context in terms of the company that you're in, Mixpanel. Maybe start off by telling us what is the type of solution or the service Mixpanel sells.
Absolutely. So currently, I'm an AE at Mixpanel, where I sell a product analytics tool, which helps either product managers, growth marketers, or data engineers understand how their users behave through either conversions, engagement, or retention. We fit into the modern data stack, where Mixpanel helps people visualize and understand their data.
Okay. And what about the type of companies you try to sell to? You know, are there certain industries or certain verticals?
Yes, primarily the digital space, and the B2C SaaS space is where I tend to spend more of my time in.
Okay. And of course, what about the type of the sizes of this company that you speak to in your role? And typically, what are their personas that you're speaking to?
Well, currently I'm focused on the startup to SMB space, so 0 to 200 employees. And the type of people that I usually speak to are product managers, growth marketers, or data engineers. Most of the time, we'll have to have a conversation with the CTO or founder as well if it's a smaller company.
Understood. And of course, lastly, what are the countries that you're actually covering right now in your role?
I handle APAC, so everything except Japan and Korea, just because of the language barriers.
Okay, amazing. Now, thanks so much for giving us, the listeners, some context in terms of your role. But we want to get into the main thing of this topic. And this is this whole topic about getting yourself hired, increasing your chances of getting hired. Now, before we even dive into the topic and have you share some of the takes, I think it's really important that people understand your situation. So, Joel, you work in Singapore, but you're not a citizen or a PR or permanent resident. Now, in your own words, explain to us what that meant for you regarding getting a job and regarding getting laid off. So tell us that situation so people know just this situation for you.
Man, baloney hits the fan, really. I don't know what else to call it. Like, I don't know if you can look at my Zoom background right now, but everything's on fire. That's usually what happens when someone has to look for a new job. I think specifically for me, as you mentioned, I'm not a PR or I'm not a citizen, and you essentially have 30 days from the moment your current employment ends to secure a new visa, a new job, and it's usually not enough time. Something I want to add right here for everybody listening is that while this might be a really specific situation for me, I'm sure that there are loads of other circumstances where you gotta get hired fast because of one reason or another. And I completely understand that there's a certain level of urgency there for you.
Yep. And I think really I want to second that, right? Because the situation for you is like essentially you're a foreigner trying to work in Singapore, and the moment you're fired, you have a certain amount of time to get a job, and a job that is willing to sponsor a visa for you. If not, essentially you have to go back to your home country. You can't stay in Singapore as well. And I think that's why when I first spoke to you, I was really amazed at the things and the work that you put in just to secure a role for yourself in the context of tech sales. And actually, you wrote a whole article about this on Medium, basically detailing your job application process, which we will definitely share and link it to this episode description. But give us a high level number. How many companies do you apply for? How many offers did you receive in the end? Just so our listeners have some context.
Sure. I applied for 70 jobs over a period of 45 days, and I received 15 interviews and 5 offers at the end of it.
Nice. And quick question, were those 5 all willing to sponsor you a visa, or you had some that you had to just throw it away simply because they couldn't sponsor one?
I had to throw 4 of them away because while they were willing to sponsor a visa, this was during the time of COVID when the third-party agencies basically told them no EPs are being given out right now. This is not possible. So the reason why I even went for 5 in the first place was because I received each offer, and every time I got it, I was really happy. I was like, oh my God, I got the job. This is like the great one. I'm really happy. And they were like, yo, I'm really sorry, but we are not able to give this job to you anymore. And then I had to go for the other one, etc., etc.
Right. And I was just doing a quick calculation. So basically you applied for 70, and in the end you got one that fit you, one that was willing to sponsor you, and one that allowed you to continue working and staying in Singapore essentially.
Yeah, and I just want to be like really pedantic about this. It's not like they were the only ones willing to sponsor me, but they were the only ones in a position where they could. So backtrack a little bit, like for a company to be able to sponsor a person here, they would have to fit certain criteria. They need to have the appropriate ratio of like citizens to whatever it is. It's like willing is one step, and then being able to is another as well. It's another step in the funnel.
Yeah. And but that's the whole thing that is so magical, right? In a sense that I know I have people that come up to me and say, hey, Asher, I want to get into tech sales, or I'm trying to get a role during this period. And maybe they just send out to, let's say, 30 companies, which is a huge number, by the way, if you send out to 30 different companies. But you send out 70 and you were very intentional about it, and you got one. So that tells you the amount of work that you actually have to do to actually get that role. And that's what we want to dive into, that process, right? And so let's dive into that. I mean, the way I look at it, a lot of people think of a job application process as just a few steps. I apply, I go for an interview, that's all, 2 steps. But when I read your Medium article, I could essentially sum up your job application process into 5 phases. So number 1, I would say, is the planning phase. You plan about the type of companies you want, your CV, the application phase. Secondly, your outreach phase, which we will talk about that, interview phase, and the follow-up and post-interview. So I'm just going to give you the stage. Tell us, Joel, when you knew that you had that time frame, that time limit, what was the first thing you did in regards to your application process?
Absolutely. And I think what would be best is if I were to, we'll tackle each like section accordingly. But like you mentioned, there are the 5 phases and whatnot. The way I look at it is that it's essentially different like parts of like one whole thing. So for example, let's say today I would like to get a job. I first have to look for the job. I have to essentially know which job I want to apply to. I have to apply for it. And once I apply for the job, I would like to increase my chances of getting the interview. So I would like message someone or email someone or do whatever I can to try and get my interview. I would have my interview. And once that's done, I would like to get the job. So I'll follow up and get that job. And in terms of that 5 phases, the reason why I broke it out is because people are much more efficient if they do the same thing over and over again rather than having to context switch consistently. So I would I would apply to more jobs in half an hour if I already had 50 jobs in front of me to apply to, rather than spending 5 minutes looking for one, 5 minutes applying, and 5 minutes doing an outreach, etc., etc. So the whole point of us breaking it down into different points is that you get into the flow and you start being more efficient, and you essentially get those numbers up as much as you can. So having said that, coming back to your question, okay, absolutely. So before you even start thinking about which jobs you want to be applying to, crafting your CV, or starting to look into your networks, what I would recommend doing is to understand the number of companies that you need to be applying to before you even do that. So let me just break that down. You have a finite number of time, and failure is not an option. For example, let's say you have, like I did, 45 days to get a job. What I did was break down that process into a couple stages, as we mentioned before. Follow-up, interview, outreach, application. And I would assign a certain percentage of chance of me succeeding to bring something into the next stage. And I would mathematically backtrack myself to understand how many jobs I would need to apply to in order to get how many interviews I needed to get, and then how many interviews I would pass to finally get the number of offers that I would want. So let me just give a specific example. Let's say I needed to get 2 offers because I want to give myself a buffer. Maybe one of my offers, one reason or another, I don't want to accept it. Okay, so 2 offers. Assuming I had 10 interviews, how many out of these interviews would I be confident that I could get a job offer out of it? I would say maybe 3 out of 10. So if I wanted 6 jobs, I would have to have 6 interviews. And if I wanted to have 6 interviews, how many jobs do I have to apply to get 6 of them? So let's say out of 10 applications, I would get 1 interview. Therefore, I need to apply to 60 jobs. So that's how I understand that, okay, I need to come up with a list of 60 highly qualified jobs to apply to.
Right. So essentially, actually, it's like a SDR role, right? You need to get, let's say, 10 qualified meetings a month. And then you from, I guess, you came out with your own percentage, but there is definitely some sort of percentage there, right? And you work backwards to say, okay, if I want to get 10 qualified meetings, how many replies must I get to my emails or calls, and so on and so forth. So that was totally really interesting that you found it out.
Totally. And very similar to wedding planning, now that I'm finding, but yeah.
Right. And so now that you have that number, let's say in this case it's 60, you need to apply to 60 or whatever number that is. How did you go about starting to look for this company? Do you use LinkedIn, Indeed, or what do you use to shortlist those 60?
Absolutely. So yes, I use LinkedIn, and that should probably, like, no fancy tools or anything like that. But before you look for the job, like I mentioned before, it's very important for you to have 60 good companies. And the underlying principle to that would be, if you get the job, you would take it. And it might seem very like self-explanatory, but like, I'm surprised often when, like, in the past, I had applied for jobs that even though I had received it, I wasn't very interested in taking it at the end of the day, because I was just concerned about, like, getting as many interviews as I wanted to. But this is about being efficient with your time. You don't have much left, right? Think about things like red flags that indicate to you that further down the line, this would be a bad idea for you to be in that company. It could be things like, if you were look for me, if I were to be looking for a sales job, it'd be like, what's the percentage of the sales reps in your company hitting target right now? And be like, oh, actually, like 30% of our reps are hitting target right now. Then if I were to take the job, it would be highly likely I would fail and I would be like back at square one, right? So that's one example. Another thing, which could be something you could ask, like, are you guys remote? Imagine you'd be like, oh, you gotta come into the office like every day. Do you want that job, man? I don't know if you want that job. But yeah, figure that out. Set up your criterias, and craft a couple personas of companies that you really understand. So think like a marketer here. For example, company A, SaaS company in this specific industry. Company B, non-SaaS company in this specific industry, etc.
But of course, what you mentioned about remote working, things like that, maybe you can only ask during interview phase. But would you say that during the planning phase, when you're looking at the companies, I would assume the things you go and look at is their LinkedIn, their website, maybe Glassdoor. Would you look at anything else other than those three?
Very good question. RepView is very good for sales roles. However, I would say Glassdoor has been really good resource for understanding like what was happening in the company.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, understood. So it sounds like that's pretty much the planning phase. That number, understand the percentage, the conversion rate, if I can call it that way, shortlist your companies. Now it seems like we are going to the second phase, which is the application phase. But anything else from you before we go to that phase?
My one parting piece of advice would be like the most ROI or the most effective thing you can do is to disqualify a company that you would not take. Like, don't waste your time putting in effort in somebody like a company that you wouldn't want to work for at the end of the day.
Understood. Okay. So I think with that, let's go to part number 2, which is the application phase. Tell us what happens during this phase. The CV, the application. Tell us all about that.
Absolutely. So if it's not been clear before, the reason why we're talking about this is that we want to increase the chances of us moving on to the next phase as much as possible. So in terms of how to, like, what is the goal of the application phase? The goal is to get an interview. Now, what I would do would be to make sure that I have, first of all, a good CV. And I think what would be really important in regards to a CV, as far as I understand it right now, is that there are ATS systems out there in the market that filter your CV based on whether or not they have a sufficient number of keywords. So, like, I think this. So a really good way to understand it is this: imagine you were the hiring manager, and I've actually seen this, by the way. I've seen my colleagues who are hiring managers do this. They have 15 to 30 minutes a day, and they are given like a bunch of CVs on their computer, and they'll literally have to just scroll through them and like pick something out of the lot. And what my takeaway from that is that what can you do to stand out from the others? Like, your goal is for someone to pick your CV over the 60 other CVs that he or she is looking at. So something that I find really helpful when it comes to thinking about like, what can I do that's different from the others, is that I created a custom deck for specific companies that I felt were worth the time. And the reason why I did that was I found that in the About Us section or in the cover letter section, currently a lot of what people are doing is they're writing a lot of like long essays, which is what typically traditionally has been done. So like, what's something different that you can do? So I created like a presentation, a pitch deck about myself, which when I was applying really differentiated me from the others. I could literally send everyone like examples of people like, wow, this is so cool, it's so innovative, etc., etc. But that was like 2 to 3 years ago. Today, I could recommend making like a video. Like, if I were you and I'll be applying for a job right now, I would create like a TikTok video and host it on a platform or whatever it is, host it on TikTok itself and be like, hey, this is me. This is why I think I'm suited for you in 6 seconds, and find a way to get it in front of the hiring manager. And
right,
end of the day, the goal is to get this person to be like, hey, this is interesting. Let's give him a shot.
Right. And I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that, right? Because essentially what you're trying to say is at the end of the day, you're trying to stand out. It's as simple as that. In fact, I will even go as far as to say, trying to make your CV fit the job, that is just the foundational step. You got to find out, okay, what do sales hiring managers care about? Let's say in the context of tech sales, what do they care about? They care about KPI, potential, performance, things like that. Go to it's as simple as going to that career site, looking at the job description, find a few words, put it in your CV. But that's just the foundation step. Essentially, what you're saying is, okay, do something more. Could be a slide deck, could be a video, whatever it is to help you stand out.
Yep.
And that is part of the application phase, which you actually touched on. How do you get that in front of the hiring manager, which is something we'll touch on later on. But would you say, is there anything else that you would do on this part? Because one of the things you talk about is also doing some sort of tracking to also make sure that you know the phases of your jobs. Is there also something that you would do at the very beginning?
Absolutely, and thank you for reminding me on this. I think that this is something that I've considered like so secondhand already that I've completely forgotten that it's it's important to do. I use a CRM to track every single application that I make to understand my metrics, because it's really difficult to move in a measurable, specific, and action-oriented way if you have no idea how you're tracking. So it's really hard for you to lose weight if you don't know how much you weigh right now.
Right. Yeah. And essentially that's what you did, right? So you had sort of like a CRM, and of course, we can put that description of CRM in the episode description. But yeah, you had a CRM to make sure that, okay, I've passed the preparation stage. I'm now at the application stage. What have I done? What have I not done? What should I follow up on? And considering you applied to 70 companies, you definitely need some sort of way to track yourself too.
Absolutely. So I reckon the goal for you, if you're listening to this, is don't overcomplicate it. Do the easiest thing for you right now, because this entire job search is going to be really difficult. It's going to take a lot of mental energy and a lot of anxiety and cognitive dissonance. So just do the easiest thing that you feel makes you happy. It could be a Google Sheet. If you want something really simple that works with your Gmail, I recommend Streak. If you want something that you're used to, you could use HubSpot, the free plan, whatever it is. Just keep it somewhere. You can write it down. You can write it in a book, but make sure you record it. And the best system is the one you end up using.
Right. Okay. Now let's talk about then the exciting part, right? So you have already done your CV. You try your best to make it. You submitted the application. Now this is the outreach part that we're talking about. Now you've done the legwork to get your slide deck up, to get your video up, personalized one, by the way, or it could be a general one to talk about your skill set. How do you get that in front of the hiring managers? Do you LinkedIn them, email them, or do you go to someone who you know that is your connection and try to get in through a referral or something? Walk us through your process.
Socially acceptable harassment. Well, very similar, but I would say that the attitude I take, and this is my experience and my belief, is that, look, man, these guys want to hire you. If you have really put together a list of the jobs that you want to, like I told you before, right? These are jobs that you know you're going to be good at, you're going to succeed at. These are jobs that you're qualified for, that you're going to do a really bang-ass job at it. You're going to do them a favor for them to hire you. And not only that, but they need you and they want you right now. So keeping that in mind, it's also really difficult for this hiring manager to find good candidates. It's people are the ultimate variable, right? You never meet the same person again. So how can you, as a hiring manager, decide this person is good because I spent an hour with him? Or I've seen this guy's CV and he's worth me spending an hour of my time on compared to the 99 other people who are doing the same thing. So taking that attitude in mind, what can you do to help him see that you are worth it? Be like, hey man, I know you need me, but I know it's really hard for you to figure out that you know I'm the best guy for you. So let me do you a favor. Let me send you cold emails. Let me figure out what your email is, and let me make an extra effort to get my email in front of your inbox rather than through an application portal. Let me try and cold call you during the day if it's convenient. Let me send you a message on LinkedIn. Let me try and speak to one of your friends so that you can refer me to you. Like if I were hiring manager and you really are good for the role, I would appreciate it. Like 3 months down the line, if you kick ass, I'll be like, yeah, man, thank God you made all that effort to tell me that you can help me. Like, that's awesome.
Yep. And I will agree with that, right? Because the fact is there are tools out there. So for example, you have LinkedIn. Chances are your hiring manager is on LinkedIn. Go for a premium, LinkedIn premium. Some of them have, if you've never done one before, you have a free trial of it. Even if you have to pay for it, it's a small amount for trying to get a job, right? You have Apollo that you can use to send sequence, get emails. You have Lucia, you have all these tools that an SDR, if you're in sales, you have used before. You have tools that to try to get the phone number. Then it's just about coming up with a script that is short, sharp, concise, and standing out. So that's what I like to tell people as well. Find different ways for you to stand out. And that's literally what you did, right, Gerard? And tell us a little bit about what's the benefits of that, What are some of the experiences you had that when you do that, you actually got really good benefits out of it?
Kind of catching me unaware here. I was like, but yes, I remember sending like a personalized message to one of the hiring managers and be like, hey, look, you get X amount of messages a day, and I know it's really hard for you to decide who's good. Here is why I'm good. Here's why you should give me a shot. And all I want is a shot. And he sent me a message and be like, you immediately jumped to candidate number 5 or whatever because of this message. Let me interview you immediately. And this is like one of the companies that ended up giving me an offer, which nice. Is why I was telling you all that story. And apologies, actually, because I realized that was like really fluffy high level. So let me speak very quickly again. Yes, Lucia. Yes, Sales Navigator. But again, for some of the followers listening here, if you're broke, or if you really, really it's so much anxiety to think about all these other tools right now. Or first step, figure out the guy's email. That's a really, really good high ROI there, because anyone working a job often really cares about that. What I would recommend doing is going to the company website and figure out what their domain is. You could do it as most of the time I do it through looking at their contact us email. So it would be support@azure.com. So I know that all the following emails that this person has to be at azure.com. Step number 1. Step number 2, I try to see if I can find an example email of anyone within the company, and it could be azure.tra. The moment I see that, I know that this is the company's format. Everyone in the company would have azure.tra. So if it's Joel Tan, it'll be joel.tan. And whatever it is, I would just guess different variations and just send emails until I get it right. Of course, don't do this for every job you're going to apply to. Do this for the ones that you feel are worth the time and effort. But do this for some of them. And if you don't know which ones to do it, just do it for the first one you think of. Action is really important for you right now. You got to move.
Yep. And the good thing is that you have your Medium article. So you definitely have some examples of some of the messages that you send out. And again, the fact that you even send out a message, you really stand out from the crowd. It's just about making sure that message is concise and what is good about you, or why you matter to the company and why you should be given a shot.
Yeah. Top tip, last thing, keep it to 3 sentences. I mean it. 3 sentences. Don't be 3 paragraphs. I had people giving me this advice and I've seen them setting up paragraph emails. 3 sentences. That's it.
Of course, if 3 sentences is not enough, you can always do that video or that slide deck, which speaks for itself. I would assume that.
Do all of them. Do all of them. Do everything that you can. Anything, there's no reason to just stick to one thing and see how that works. Do all of it at once.
Understood. Okay, so it seems like at this point, we have stood out, we have gotten the attention of the hiring manager, and let's assume we are now to the interview stage. And a lot of times I tell people, right, that if you can get past that stage, you stand out, the battle is half won. You already won 50% or better. It's just make sure that you secure the next 50%. And that is the interview phase. So before we go into questions that you ask, what should you do before you go to the interview? What is the absolute things that you must take note of, or you must make sure that you have at the back of your head?
Oh, yes. I think it's really important for you to be able to describe the company in like 30 seconds or less. You need to know the elevator pitch of the company, and in a way that's like at least read the about us on the company page, because most recruiters will ask you, hey, do you know what we do here at X? And if you don't know, then they'll be like, oh, okay, I wish you had researched us. Whatever. It's just showing that that you care and that you want to put in the effort. Other than that, I would definitely recommend researching the hiring manager itself. A individual's personal LinkedIn is a great resource for understanding their personal history and anything else like what they like and what they don't like. I think that personal history is the best resource that you could use. Like, for example, oh, Asher, I see that you work at Supermetrics. You must be familiar with the MarTech solution. You know, I used to do MarTech, etc. And you must care about this because of that. And if you don't know what to do with that information, you can just ask somebody, you know, text a friend.
Yep.
Ask the audience. But yeah.
Yeah. And again, I want to point out, right, like exactly what you said, there are more than enough resources out there. Of course, you have the company's website, you have their case studies that you can look at, you have just a website tells you everything you need to know about the company. And you have YouTube, for example. Go search the founder. That's how I got to know my current role, Supermetrics. I searched the founder on YouTube, and he was on podcasts. And that was really great information. Like listening to those podcasts, I could tell you the elevators pitch, tell you the story of how the company started just by listening to that 30 minutes podcast, for example.
Totally,
so there's more than enough resources. But how would you start the conversation, right? So let's get concrete a little bit here. And I want to hear from you. How would you start off to make sure that you show them that you have done your homework, your research? And how would you make sure that it's a good conversation? Let's say right now you're talking to the hiring manager.
So I can tell you what I would do, but I don't know if this is applicable to everybody else, but this is what I do. Just to recap very quickly, my goal is to stand out still, because I still want to be the guy that he moves me on to the next stage rather than everybody else. And the way I do it is they'll always ask, okay, so now, you know, we've had the first 10 minutes. This is the role. This is what we do. Now tell me about yourself. And I go into this thing. I'd be like, okay, so usually this is when someone goes through like a 30-second monologue. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use that pitch deck that I had sent you in the application phase, and I'm actually going to pitch you instead. I'm going to show you how I would sell your product like I'm going to sell you myself. And then I go through like my pitch of myself. This is why you should think about me. This is what I'm looking for. This is why blah, 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 blah. These are the use cases that I solve. And then I make sure to keep that short. But usually, like I've done this about 30 times now. 20 to 25 to 30 times, people are like, wow, that was great. I love it. Please, you know, move on to the next round. Take my money. Yeah, that's how I stand up.
Yeah, and I always tell people that the interesting thing when you you give a slide deck, or rather you prepare something. And of course, that slide deck, to me, it just needs to have two main things, or rather two of the most important things is number one, why you want this job and why you want this company. And of course, you can add a few more things there, right? But essentially, I realized, because that's what I do as well for my job interviews, I prepare slides. And I realized what it gives you, now that I think about it, it gives you control. You should really take control of the situation.
Yep.
Instead of having the hiring manager guess, okay, what should I ask you? I need to try to dig something out of you to find out a motivation. I don't need to do that anymore. Within the first 5 minutes, you have told me everything I need to know. Now we can talk about the deeper parts. You can ask your question. It can be a conversation now. So that's what I think.
Totally. It's a story, right, that you can like paint in their head, and like you make them feel a certain way. You make them feel like, wow, this was fun to listen to. Because like, and this is something that I use actually, and I say this exact line. I'll be like, hey, you probably like you probably attend 5 interviews a day because you're trying really hard to like hire for this role right now, and it's all starting to blend together. Well, sit back, relax. I'm just gonna tell you why I'm the best one for you. And they're like, "Whoa, that's great! I love it." But yeah,
No, that's true. I totally agree, right? You just stand out straight away. And when the hiring manager goes home that day, that night, if he were to think about his job, he will be thinking about the interview with you just because it's so unique and you stand out. But I mean, let's go to the questions, right? What are some of the questions? Of course, you definitely have to ask about remote working, things like that with the talent acquisition person. That's something you will ask straight away. But what are some of the questions you will ask a hiring manager just to show you have certain qualities and things like that?
That's a very good question. The only things that I can comment on are specific to a sales role. And I'm trying to like
It's
think
fine
about
if it's just a sales role, because this is a tech sales podcast anyway.
Oh, that's true. That is very true. So yes, I was speaking about it before, which is how many percentage of your reps have actually hit target. And I think it's really important for me to understand why are they hiring for this role. Is it a backfill? Did someone leave this role? Are they being promoted? How were they doing before in this role? What are they trying to achieve here? It's since you do sales anyway, think about this like a discovery. Like, why are they looking for your product, which is you? What are they trying to solve here? More often than not, this hiring manager has some plans for that. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if I could add on as well, you actually mentioned something. For example, you said look at the hiring manager's history, right? Where did he come from? What did he or she do before that? You ask those questions, right? And that shows that, for example, you research, you understand your persona as well. Or sometimes it could be as simple as, hey, I noticed on the website that we are working with XYZ company. I'm curious, how did that happen? Or you can ask questions like, hey, if I were to go into this role, what are the industries you want me to take charge of? What is the market segment you want me to take charge of? Essentially, you're already asking questions as if you are in the job. And people like that. It means that you've already done your research, you know the market well. Now you are clarifying and trying to understand deeper about the role.
Yeah. Pretend if you're going to like do the role the next day, or like what are the important things that you need to ask? Yeah.
Yep. Anything else you will add on your end?
Yes. So okay, you've done your bit. You've tried to impress him. You've like now the interview is coming to a close. I like let me share with you like a really important thing that I do that has helped me so much, and that's being like, is there any reason why you wouldn't hire me right now? Or something gentler. Be like, is there any reason, any concerns that you might have about moving me to the next round? And then you can like, those are just objections, man. You can like counter those immediately, and bam, it should help you move on to the next phase a lot more easier.
Yeah, essentially you are trying to get almost like a soft confirmation. Like if there's anything they're worried about, right then and then, you're almost forcing them to tell you, okay, so what's that concern that you have or objection that you have?
Yeah,
and then
totally.
you can address it straight away right there.
Yeah, I've been hired on the spot because of that question before. Like, and I think for this question, it's really important to ask it. It's not what you say; it's how you say it. Like in the first time I did it, it came off really like harsh and abrasive. But if you're like, just tone it down. Be like, hey, is there any reason why you wouldn't want to move into the next phase right now? Any concerns you might have? I just want to like have the opportunity to say something about it.
Yep. And I think hiring managers will appreciate it as long as your tone is right. Like you said, the tone is important. Instead of going like, hey, what is something that can prevent me from going to the next round? You tone it down.
Yeah. Totally.
That's right. So last one, of course, after the interview phase, you've applied, you've shortlisted, you've stood out in the interview, you've crushed it. Now it's the follow-up, or what we call the post-interview phase. What would you do at this stage to bring your whole interview phase to a nice close?
Absolutely. So, I would treat it like a sale, which is, this, and most of the time, I don't know if you believe in this, but the sale is done in the follow-up. So it's really important that you send a recap email and be like, hey, I know that might have been a lot, like taking it from the perspective that was a lot to digest for the guy. So briefly recapping our conversation, here is what you were looking for, and here is why I would fit. You agreed with me that we would speak again on this date, so I would follow up with you accordingly on this date. And this is something I failed to add as well in the last part, which is like, what's our next steps here? When are you going to get back to me? When should I follow up with you? And follow up at that point. Adding on to this, I think that it's really important, and this is beyond just job applications, but don't be like, hey, new number, who this, following up. Because like no one really appreciates that more than once. You could do that once and get away with it, but other than that, it's really important you add value to that email. Be like, hey, I saw that you recently posted XYZ, and this is why I feel like it's still relevant to our conversation from back then. I saw that Asher, you did a social media post about product-led sales and understanding high intent users so that we can convert them. And this is an example of what I did. And this is why I feel I'm still relevant for the role. Like stuff like that.
Understood. Yeah, but I mean, tell me a little bit about during times when, let's say, you've still done your work, you've put in the effort, how do you still deal with rejection? And to be fair, sometimes rejection could be no fault of your own. It just so happened that they knew someone, then they worked with someone, and that someone is just someone they wanted to hire, that someone became available. Or it could be other factors that they may really want you, but they decided to go with someone else because he or she has the relevant connections or something. How did you deal with those moments? Or for your case, sorry, we want you, but we can't sponsor your visa. How did you deal with all those things?
Oh, man. Take it on the chin and move. Like, the best advice that I adopt myself in my life is that people's actions are not a reflection of you, but a reflection of themselves. And like, all you got to do is you got to do your best. Not every date is going to go well, man. You're not going to marry every person that you end up like speaking with, right? But it's going to come. It's going to come.
Yep. And I think that's a very good sort of encouragement to people, right? And of course, Joel, we are coming near to the end of our podcast. And as you know, even as we are recording this podcast, we are kind of in a situation where lots of layoffs are happening, especially in the tech sector. People are trying to apply jobs, and it's a tough market now because chances are if you're applying, 10 other people are applying for that same role. And it's not like a lot of companies are hiring at the same time as well. What is one last message you would leave to our listeners who may be in a job search now?
No matter what happens, you're going to be okay. As long as you have your creativity and your intelligence and your hardworking nature, you're going to be fine. Even if you don't get that job, you will get another job at some point. So I think it's really important to just put one foot in front of the other.
And I think really, I also based on what you had just said, right? I always remind people that chances are you just put in a little bit more effort, you be more creative, don't be lazy. You already stand out from 50% of the crowd. Chances are.
Totally. Like if you're already listening to this, you're probably already standing out from the rest of the crowd. And I think like I just want to end by saying that like just because someone else gets a job doesn't mean you can't get a job as well. There are enough. I know times are tough right now, but there is enough for everybody out there. It's not like a zero-sum game. It's a non-zero-sum game. So don't worry. Just keep putting your foot one in front of the other. Try as hard as you can, and be better than you were yesterday. Do a little bit more than you were yesterday, and you will eventually get a job.
And I think you're a proof of that, just on the way that you're doing things. I think that's really a proof of effort brings you somewhere.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, so last two questions I have, and these are the same two questions I always ask my guests, right? Number one is, what do you love about your job at the moment?
Oh, I love the people that I speak to. I love thinking product, doing product. I love the modern data stack. So really happy.
Nice. And of course, the last question, this can be related to your job, can be related to something else that you're doing outside your job. But what gets you out of bed every morning, every day? Are there goals? Are there things you're aiming for?
The honest truth is crying and poop, because I currently have a new 3-month-old puppy, and every morning at 7 a.m. I wake up to this little cute potato that's trying to climb on my bed covered with some poop, and we're like, oh, please God, go away. That gets me out of bed. But I currently, and this is like a shameless plug for myself, but I'm working on a puppy playdate program. So if anybody out there has a dog, it's you know how socialization and how it's like trying to meet other people. I'm trying to connect people. So if you have a dog and you want to have some puppy dates, let me know. I'll hook you up. Tell me the kind of people you want to meet, the kind of dogs you want to meet. I'll sort you guys out. That's what I do.
Yep. And of course, we'll definitely make sure that people reach out to you if they have any of those similar situations as yours. I think it would be nice for people with similar situations as you, lifestyle as you, to meet up and just have a chat.
For sure. I'm always happy to help whoever it is that you are. Anytime, anywhere. All you got to do is just hit me up.
And speaking of hitting you up, what's the best way that our listeners can reach you actually?
Please reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Joel Emmanuel. Yeah.
So we'll make sure that we put your LinkedIn URL in this episode description. But with that, Joel, we unfortunately have come to the end of today's episode. But I really want to say thank you so much for being today's guest. I think it was a really important topic that we talk about. And of course, to all who are tuning in, if you're looking for a job, we wish you all the best. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and connect with me or Joel on LinkedIn. But that's all we have for you. We wish you guys all the best. Take care, stay safe, and have a great revenue journey. All right, Joel, say bye to our audience.
Bye-bye. Good luck.
All right, take care, everybody.
You do
Take
it.
care.